I was famous for 30 seconds. And that was when I walked in the opening ceremony. They wrote an article saying that, oh, Anthony was never a real Jamaican. I was emotionally drained. I was spiritually tired. I was mentally exhausted, and I was physically in pain.
Hello and welcome back to the Alex Witherow Show. Today I have a special guest, an old friend, Olympian, motivational speaker, and also actor, and my understudy in a play, Anthony Watson. Great to have you here.
I feel like it would have been more appropriate if you're just like, and my shadow, for obvious reasons. How you doing, big dog? It's good to see you again.
Good to see you, man. Good to see you. I love calling you my understudy. I think that's
it's only because you're taller than me. It's quite literally everything is like chest level between you and I.
That's right. So let's first of all, thank you for visiting. I know you are normally based elsewhere. You're not normally in Miami.
Oh God, no! You couldn't pay me enough money to live here.
So
I have a lot of respect for you. I mean, like I look everywhere, and everything around this city. It's just like I want to buy like a bottle of water. It's just like one of those things. It's like it's too expensive.
It is expensive here. I will say there are pockets of Miami that aren't too bad, but you just have to kind of go to the right places. But
sure.
You're doing a big podcast tour right now through Miami.
Yeah.
You met with Laura Trump.
Mm-hmm.
You met with Patrick Bet-David.
Yeah, Patrick Bet-David's company.
And you've met with some other folks, and now you are on the Alex Witherow Show. This is clearly the most important and
I've been looking forward to this one all week. Okay,
so the most famous podcast you're doing on this trip.
Yeah, absolutely. I was like, for those of you who don't know, the Alex Witherow Show. I know I'm not supposed to look at the camera, but I'm making a statement to everybody out there. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so that you can see when every kind of new episode drops. What do you think?
Hey, that was great. Thank you.
I've done this a time or two.
How was Laura?
Laura was a lot of fun, and she is actually, like, we have a lot in common because she's a musician.
Okay.
She's a singer, and she's putting out some music. I recently put out a song with one of my friends, Mason Musso. You might have remembered him from the band Metro Station.
Sure.
From way back when.
Yeah.
And he's actually, like, a hardcore conservative, like, loves America and everything. So we were just like, dude, like, everyone nowadays in, like, the world is, like, trying to write motivational music, and ain't nothing wrong with that. But, I mean, like, me and Mason, when we wrote our song, it's called I Love the USA, which is available on iTunes for download and all streaming platforms right now.
You got to stop looking at the camera.
But I was making a plug to the camera. I was making a plug to all of you out there. So that's where it's available at to stream it. And so the whole theme of that was trying to make something fun and energetic and just something that you could play at like a barbecue or like a cookout or with your friends to like really enjoy, the United States of America. And so we put that out, and it's actually been getting some really good buzz. We were on the news talking about it. Then Laura was like, hey, I want you on my show. And I was like, wait, like, huh?
Now?
I was like me? But she's really sweet. She's really professional. She's really down to earth. She's currently, I think, living in New York. So I just had to call in. And then
you did a call-in.
Yeah, I did a call-in, but I've met her.
I thought she was hanging out around here somewhere.
No. I mean, like, but she's in West Palm near Mar-a-Lago with the rest of the Trumps when they're here during season and whatnot. But with everything happening in the world, they're all over the place. Yeah, running the family business and whatnot. But she's really great. So cool. She's killing it. She's doing her thing, and she's on a speaking tour herself, and hopefully she'll do a concert, because I'm like, you're putting all this music out, and I was like, I ain't never seen you perform any of it. So
yeah.
But that was what it was like working with her. Patrick Bet-David has a company called Valuetainment, so I was here doing a show with one of his podcasters down here, and they are very techie people, but they're also really, really holistic and like down to earth and all about like healing and everything else. So
that's a common theme in Miami.
Yeah,
there's a sneaky health culture here that you wouldn't think.
Sneaky? Yeah, it's like all up in your face.
It is when you get here, it's in your face.
Oh yes. So they were just like, we own like a slew of like wellness centers. So like after the podcast yesterday, they had me stick my feet in that detoxing tank.
Did you get detoxed?
Apparently, I mean, like the colors of the water was turning. They're like, oh look, that's from digestive, that's from kidneys, that's blood clots, that's metals, and that's minerals. Like, what the heck are you doing?
You got cleansed.
I was like walking barefoot through airports. You know what I'm saying? Picking up every disease that's out there known to man. So right. But and then that was that, and here I am now, my boy.
Appreciate it. Appreciate having you here. Appreciate having you here.
Happy to be here. What have you been up to?
What have
I haven't seen you in a minute.
It's been a while.
The last time I saw you was when we did the The show that shall not be named together.
Oh yes, Salem.
I love that show.
I did too. I had a great time.
I had an
even though it was a
amazing
mess.
time. I mean, if there was any other show that we could bring back, I would bring back Salem.
It was an interesting story, and I don't know if you are aware of this. There is a documentary out now about the creation of that show.
Oh, you watched it?
I watched it, and it was good.
What'd you think?
Because you remember Nick was filming that documentary when we were there.
Yeah.
He was just kind of off in the corner. I never really thought much of it. I was like stressed out of my brain the whole time.
I know. How many times did you have to like rewrite the script over and over again?
Yeah. So I was just dealing with Brian and trying to keep my head above water on that whole thing. But, you know, I mean, we put together, I will say that first weekend, and the documentary really captures this well. The first weekend was a great opening weekend.
It was.
It was awesome. My friends who came to that show loved it. They thought it was phenomenal.
I loved the show, dude. Like that set. Everything about it was phenomenal. The space was fine. I think, remember, the issues we kept running into was tech.
Yeah.
Where you couldn't hear the microphones in like certain sections of the outdoors.
Being outdoor.
But it's just like when we were doing mic tests and everything, like I remember the sound guy going all the way into the woods and everything else. And like the signals and the antennas were picking it up. It was when you had multitudes of people in the line and the way and the frequency, it kept running interference.
Yeah.
But for what we did, dude, in that small little acreage of space, you know, we did an entire show, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I think it got harder for us as a cast when we had to like do the exact same thing without any of the help that we had.
Oh, in the new space, it was weird. I mean, it was a little.
And the space was like doing it in this room.
Yeah, we had. I mean, for those who aren't familiar with this story, I mean, we had to move our whole production because we did an outdoor play out in Georgia, just about 45 minutes out south of Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And
because that was back when you were living in Atlanta.
Yeah, I was living in Atlanta. And that whole situation, the permitting got shut down. Mm-hmm. I think mainly because it received so much press coverage. So there was a lot of press coverage in the Atlanta press about this show. And obviously, Brian has some folks that don't like him in that area. So I think someone looked into the permitting and forced us to move.
Well, I mean, there were a lot of things that were a little like off with the plays. Is like, remember, like the help was like the people who were like building sets and everything. It's like they were only there for a limited amount of time. And then myself and the guy who was playing Steven, the guy who was playing Cotton Mathers, you know, we were there every day from like 7:30 in the morning until like midnight because we were cleaning up, taking out debris, setting up props and everything. And, you know, we didn't have to, but I mean, like, that's how dedicated all of us were to the show, which is why when it got like shut down for that whole week, it made all of us like really contemplate, like, what the heck are we doing?
Yeah, no, that was a big blow to the cast. I mean, when you put that much work into a production, mm-hmm. and then you're told you can't do it now, I mean, it's a huge blow.
So for any of you guys that don't know what it's like, this is immersive theater. So immersive theater is, for example, like we were doing this in a tavern and we were legit in a bar that we had converted into a playhouse. And so we could only sit a limited amount of people in chairs and tables, but we did the entire play around them. We sang around them. We picked up people from the audience and danced with them.
It was the same set as mm-hmm. Walking Dead. The Walking Dead shot on that
exact plot of land and that exact space.
And there was another, I forget, there was
Shia LaBeouf's movie.
Yeah, there was a Shia LaBeouf movie.
That famous like 1950s like gangster film that he was in.
Yeah, I forget what it's
shot
called.
There. I think. Like,
yeah,
Fearless.
It's all about like moonshine. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Something about that. But you know, we learned how to take like a lot of things in like a space and then do it. So like when you guys did like Sleepy, like wasn't that a lot more fun when you were able to just like be in a space?
Oh yeah, I mean Sleepy Hollow was a lot easier to just navigate. It was just way more structured, way more dealt with. I didn't have to write at all, which was nice.
You mean you just had to go there?
I just had to go and show up and learn my lines and act. I mean, it felt like a vacation. I will say that was literally the most haunted show I've ever done. I've never seen so many ghosts in my life than that plot of land. I mean, I could not believe how many ghosts I saw out there.
I was like, isn't that the one where you like got your pew pew and we're just like, you know, like ready to blast a ghost?
I mean, where we were staying initially out in that log cabin, I mean, I like the girls were the female cast members were screaming that night. We saw so many crazy things. And yes, I was like locked and loaded, up on the roof, basically.
Oh my god! It's like Mission Impossible.
I took the
7.
high ground. It was crazy out there, man. It was so crazy. I mean, it was like, we were seeing lights, we were seeing all kinds of crazy stuff that night. The motion sensors were constantly going off. Mm-hmm. I mean, it felt like the house was like surrounded by like ghosts. I mean, it was crazy.
I mean, don't forget you were in the woods, so those motion sensors could have been deer, raccoons,
of course,
or a bat occasionally.
Yeah,
but
it was a little bit of everything. No, but when we got into the rehearsal space, I mean, literally, like the lights were flickering on and off.
Yeah,
and I was like, wow, something is definitely here.
Well, I mean, it helps. Let me ask you this though: what do you miss most about Salem? What was your favorite part about Salem?
I mean, it was challenging, but it was just I think the grit and perseverance to kind of get through the whole thing together was certainly. I mean, and you should check out the documentary. It's called American Theater. It really well done. It's won an award at Slam Dance Film Festival.
Yeah, Nick crushed it.
Yeah, no, it's a really well done documentary. So I mean, that was definitely something that I took from it. But it was a great experience.
My favorite thing absolutely in that entire play was the opening song that we all sang, because all of the scoring and all of the tracks were original. You remember it?
Yeah.
It's like the Salem of purity, essence of night, remains a bright beacon twixt darkness of night. The sinners purge, the witches bind, will deep evil perish as this tale unwinds.
Yeah, no, it was great.
The righteous of Salem. All saints,
yeah, you're bringing me back. You're bringing me back. So let me ask you this. So I remember when I first met you, you were introduced to me as a former Olympian.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I've never acted with a former Olympian before. Why is he on set here? So, and I know you have kind of a unique story and background with the Olympics. Mm-hmm. I think when people think about the Olympics, they think, oh, you represent your country and it's this amazing experience. And so give me a background of like how you were involved in the Olympics and how your story is a little different.
Well, I mean, I started with Team USA in 2012 or 2013, and I was a walk-on because the sport that I competed in the Olympics was skeleton. So for those of you that don't know what skeleton is, it's like bobsled. So they go down the same ice track that the bobsled do, only we're on a one-person sled laying on your stomach going headfirst 4 inches off the ice at about 80 miles per hour.
Yeah.
So, and everyone was like, how the heck does one get in that? I was like, one, research, and two, it was the only sport that took walk-ons. Like, you came, you did a combine, they tested you in speed, strength, agility, and explosiveness. And then after that, the process is you get invited to what's called a school, where you get to learn to see if the coaches see any potential in you about being, someone that they're going to invest in. Then after that, you get invited to the elite development program, which means that they start training you to now start getting ready to now start taking on world competition in different races all around the world. So with Team USA, I was somebody that competed with them for 3 years, but didn't really see myself going to the trajectory that I wanted to because it was so competitive and like the politics really was off with a lot of people there. So because I have dual citizenship through my father, who's Jamaican, and who immigrated here, I was able to compete for the country of Jamaica, and I ended up making Olympic history as the first ever Jamaican in a Winter Olympics ever to compete in that sport. So,
dude, you're like literally real life Cool Runnings.
Oh my gosh, here we go. Dude, you don't understand.
I am feeling the rhythm.
Okay,
I'm feeling the ride.
We're gonna debunk a lot of
Get
things
on
right
up.
now.
It's bobsled time. You're like, okay, that's enough.
Sorry, I'm gonna be doing that a lot. See, me and Alex have like a history. One day we were just like on set with each other, and then like I came up and I pretended to slap him, and then we just
and then I did slap you.
For the rest of the run that we were doing, I think it was like 3.5 weeks. Every time we saw each other, we were just looking at creative, fun, slick ways to like smack each other.
Dude, on this podcast, I don't even have to get up. I can have my editor slap you in the edit. So just be careful, because I could literally
just like
exactly.
Yusuf.
Yeah, Yusuf. Well, he's got my back.
I got you. So, with everything that was going on there, what ended up happening was that it wasn't just a historical thing. It meant a lot to me because people don't realize that Olympians don't get paid. We don't make it. We don't make anything.
Right.
We don't. Like, you have to pay to compete. And so I tell everybody, we train just as hard, if not harder, than your Tom Brady's, your Steph Curry's, your LeBron James athletes, all of these guys that get paid multi-millions of dollars a year to basically be injured. Like, how many times have you seen LeBron James like play a full season? You see him on the bench now with his like shades on, his chains, the same thing with all these other big superstars and whatnot. You know, nobody knows how to actually like do anything through adversity anymore these days because they're so comfortable. But with us, we have to train just as hard as they do. And we do that with the hope that someone will at least try to pick up one expense to make the journey that less intense.
So you've got probably people who are on the Olympic team who can barely afford to get there.
No, and I mean, like, that's why the Olympics is a really, really tough journey. Most athletes will never tell you this, but I'll give you the inside scoop. A lot of these athletes, when they retire in their 30s, if they haven't medaled, a lot of them have been doing this since they were teenagers. Yeah. And, you know, you have 15 plus years of trying to be in a sport where most of them have done it, been on world championship teams, World Cup teams, but have always failed in their stint because the Olympics is every 4 years.
Yeah.
So someone goes for 4 quads, that's 16 years.
Yeah.
Right there. And so in that whole process of times, you know, that's why you see so much heartbreak when you see athletes that missed qualifications of making an Olympic team by this much. And they fall apart because a lot of them, myself included, we ended our careers thousands upon thousands of dollars in debt. You know, you can't like get an apartment. You can't like pay bills. Like a lot of them are like your age and my age still living at home. Yeah. And it's because they've drained and put everything they have into this dream of theirs that they got so close to but didn't make. Yeah. And I remember one of my friends who was on the Australian team, because I was having a really, really rough go at it, like when we were in Canada competing, I think a couple of years ago. And you know, I was telling him, I was like, I just want to get better so that I can freaking make money and like get rich and famous off of this. He's like, dude, then you're missing the entire point. He's like, the Olympics and the journey is supposed to change you here. Yeah. It's not supposed to change your pocketbook. He's like, there's so many people who have been to multiple Olympics, but because of the countries that they come from, it hasn't done anything for them. Right. For them, this is just them trying to prove a point to everybody else that's coming up after them, or to still try and find a way to make it work for themselves, which is why they're still competing. So everyone's story is different. Not everyone is on the Simone Biles, Michael Phelps train. Of course. Because what people don't realize is that Michael Phelps competed in Sydney in 2000 as a teenager, placed, I think, 6th. And then after that was when he dedicated his life to the whole routine of eat, sleep, swim. And that's when he started smashing records. That's when he started winning, till now he's the most decorated Olympian ever of all time as a swimmer. But his mother, you know, worked 4 part-time jobs, you know, on top of being a full-time mother to support him in his career. And now that he's in a position where he's done so much, he's been able to return the favor to his mom. Yeah. You know, same thing with Simone Biles, the gymnast. You know, she and her parents both had to work 3 or 4 part-time jobs just to be able to afford her training. And then when she was able to make it successfully, you know, now she's in a position to like help them in return. But I mean, like, look, these parents, you know, they're good parents because they see their kid doing something. They're not out there doing drugs. They're not out there doing anything ridiculous. So they dedicate their life to making them push themselves in an area that is actually going to make them better.
Do you feel that certain sports in the Olympics lend themselves to sponsorships and financial riches more than other sports?
Oh, of course. You know, like we look at the summer sports. You have volleyball. Yeah. You have professionals that play beach volleyball here that then go over to play amateur. You know, the Olympics is amateur because nobody gets paid. Professional means you get paid for what you do. Right. So you have a bunch of amateurs that aren't professional, but at professional level quality, that are now missing out on opportunities because now it's become a political game and everyone's just like, oh, there's no politics. And I was like, there absolutely is politics.
Talk to me about that. How is it getting more political?
I will tell you this from an insider's perfect view. Sure. There is so much corruption within the Olympics because you have countries that are competing for dominance. Yeah. You have countries like the Russians, because that's how I got into the Olympics.
Well, they've had a lot of
in 2018 with the doping scandal. Right. And so the Russian country is one of the biggest donors to the Olympic Committee. And so that's why the Olympic Committee will do its due diligence and ban athletes for having drugs and for being tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs, steroids, and everything else. And then after 2 months when the competition's over, they'll be like, oh, after investigation, we didn't really find anything. And then they'll let them continue again, which is why you see a lot of athletes having an issue with that. And when I was in the Olympics in 2018, the Russian nation, the country of Russia, got punished by the Olympic Committee because they got caught in a big scandal that they just couldn't cover up anymore, which is why the Russian team, the best way that they could embarrass them was they stripped them of representing Russia. So they were literally the Olympic Committee of Russia.
I remember that.
And so they just walked in with just like white outfits and they walked everywhere. Weren't even allowed to like represent their flag or country, and they couldn't wear their colors because of that. So they were there competing as the nation of Russia, but they weren't recognized as Russia. And so then you have the United States, that because now we're trying to be a powerhouse in a lot of the world right now. That's why you see us recruiting all of these highly paid professional athletes to now represent America in other dominant sports, which is why Team USA basketball
right.
is all these professionals that are out here. They call it the dream team because it's like there's no way. But now that the NBA has become so big and that so many people have come from Europe to come play in the NBA, that's why you have like athletes like Nikola Jokic. He played for Serbia, and Serbia did really well.
Yeah.
You've got Wembanyama from France. You've got Rudy Gobert from France. You've got all of these other players
SGA
now.
from Canada.
SGA from Canada, and all these people that are actually making a good run
right.
For other countries to compete with Team USA.
No, I mean, Olympic basketball this past round was phenomenally entertaining.
Yeah.
Like phenomenal.
It almost looked like they actually had to win.
No, they worked for it. I mean, and it's funny because like you hear always these comparisons to the 1994 Dream Team. I'm like, listen, back in '94, there were only 8 other NBA players in other countries. Now, these countries like France, Canada, Serbia,
Spain, Argentina,
they are chocked with pros.
Yep.
It's tough.
Even Australia.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, exactly.
So all of these things are happening. And then you've got the Chinese,
right,
who come in. And so when it comes to like issues that are happening with the world, China owns a lot of the merchandise and products, which is why like tariffs are being slapped like crazy on it. Russia, a plug for a lot of the oil and natural resources with the factories and plants that they have strategically set up all over the world. The war that was happening with them. Now the invasion that China may be making on other countries and whatnot. And all of that being a play with the United States being like the bishop on the board that can move this way or that way, and whatever move we make is either going to open the door for one or shut it for another. And so I tell everybody, I'm just like, the 3 nations that always make the world the biggest talking point are always the 3 nations that are competing for the top spot in the medal count, which is always Team USA, it's the Russian national team, and the Chinese national team. You always see those 3 nations. No other country ever gets closer to it. That's why when you see the opening ceremony and it's just like Russia, 214 athletes, China, 318 athletes, USA, 464 athletes. They are overloaded with a lot of people so that they have more chances for medal counts.
Yeah, I've heard that the Chinese government basically approaches families when their child is young. If they show like great aptitude at gymnastics or something, they will basically the government will tell their family, your daughter is going to be a professional gymnast, whether she likes it or not. Mm-hmm. And we're going to just focus her on being a professional gymnast from now until 18.
Dude, it's horrendous.
They basically force them into.
You ever seen? I've seen some horrendous things from some of the people over there. I remember watching this video and seeing this little 4-year-old girl crying because her coach is literally sitting on her back, stretching her legs to make her more flexible and doing all this other stuff. And then they tell the students, like they tell the athletes, you're not allowed to see your family unless you medal. You're not allowed to do this unless you medal. And the thing about the Olympics is this, it's just like, it's temporary. I was famous for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And that was when I walked in the opening ceremony because one, there was only 4 of us. So it wasn't hard to be seen. And, like I got a lot of coverage. But after that, it's just like, unless you tuned in for my event, nobody knew who I was.
Right.
And nobody cared. And so for me, I had to learn that really quick that, you've got to do this for reasons that are bigger than just wanting to be known and famous. Because I said fame is fleeting. Fame is fleeting and it's temporary.
Yeah.
That's why when you see people now that are always like trying to remain relevant, they're always doing things that are so extreme that you have no choice but to talk about them.
Right.
And when you do things like that, that's what kind of now starts to shift things in a way that makes the sport not the sport anymore and more about like the commentary and the reactions that people get rather than like the actual sport of it, which is why like you see so many athletes and so many people now that don't watch certain sports because it's just become too about the things that are outside, off the field and off the court.
Right.
Like everyone wanting to take stances for things and protest and everything else, like the whole Colin Kaepernick situation that happened that now spurred this whole thing in sports all over the world and whatnot. And I'm saying like the whole issue of that rose from there, that everyone was quote unquote kneeling for, those issues are still happening and no one's saying nothing. Colin Kaepernick got his millions, and then was making statements in his Netflix documentary that he's like, the NFL is like a modern day slave trade. I'm like, it's a modern day slave trade that you're desperately trying to get back in. I said, right. as a runaway slave, I never knew runaway slaves that were so desperate to go back to the plantation. So I said, you making that comparison, but yet holding open workouts and having your agent reach out to teams. And I was like, and this is a guy who comes from a mixed family who had parents that gave him everything because they wanted him to have the best opportunity at life. And now he's on this documentary bashing them just because they were Caucasian.
Right.
And I'm like, bro, you can wear a black turtleneck, you can wear a leather jacket, you can grow an afro, but that doesn't make you any more connected to anything out there. It just makes you a puppet.
Yeah.
And so that's what got me to the next stage of my career, because it was during an interview I did with a reporter. She asked me in the ending stages of my Olympic career, like what I thought with like BLM and everything happening in the world, and how did I feel about social justice as a black athlete? Did I feel like people like were targeting me? And I'm like, these were questions that I didn't even think about because nobody ever did that.
Right.
Because in sports, in my sport, no one cares about your race. The only race that matters is the one you're doing on the ice.
Right.
I was just like, so for me,
especially the Winter Olympics.
Exactly. So I mean, like, but look, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I got my fair share of hate when I got in there, because I mean, like, me being me, like I come from track, I come from everything else, but stereotypes. It's just like, oh, black people are just genetically more gifted than like other athletes, which is true to an extent. I don't see any black dart throwers or,
You're right. I have not seen a black dart thrower either.
I'm just trying to think of random sports. But when
we're very good at backgammon too.
Oh heck yeah! Don't get me started on chess.
Well, that's more of an Asian thing.
I thought that was Chinese checkers.
Russians too. They're good at that.
True. So I was in a place where when I first came in, everyone got a little uneasy.
Right.
Because they were just like, and I got comments like, why don't you just go back to track and field? You should stick to basketball or football, like the sport of your people. And people were saying it as like humor. But
who is saying this to you?
So some of them were like my USA teammates at the time.
Really?
Yeah.
So this is okay. So I know you were in the 2018 Olympics.
2018 Winter
Olympics, mm-hmm. Right? So. And I guess at what time are you receiving these types of comments?
That's 2018. This was like 2014,
okay.
2013, 2014.
So, and you're hearing this from other Team USA people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interesting.
And I mean, like, they mask it as humor and stuff, but
right.
They were just like, because any other person that comes on into the program becomes a threat to everybody else, because you don't know how good they are, how quick they're going to like progress, because everyone progresses in the sport differently. When you're flying headfirst at 80 miles per hour, it's like some people adjust to it really well. Some people, it takes a minute. Some people have to like learn like the fine intricacies on like how to drive precisely. Some people are naturally like dominant athletes from the very beginning at the push start. They can power and drive. They can push a sled the fastest you've ever seen it. But when their driving comes, they start slowing down because they're hitting everything on the way down. You got people that push dead slow, but can drive the heck out of a track. And if you beat them 2 seconds at the start, they'll beat you 6 seconds by the time they get to the bottom of the track, just because they understand the science, the geometry, the angles of everything, and they're really big students of the game and the sport. So for me, the only thing that kept me in this was that like I just want to have fun. I just want to have fun and enjoy it. There were times that it was stressful because you have a lot of people that it's like, to them, if they don't perform well, then they're going to miss out on something. And for me, I'm just like, look, I have a lot to learn, but I at least need to have fun. And so that was the whole premise of my outtake there. But then, like when I met like athletes from Canada, other athletes all over the world, I remember like, I was in Switzerland, and like, I remember getting a lot of looks from a lot of locals just because I'd walk by and they were just like, I'm like, yeah, these people ain't never seen someone that looks like me.
Interesting.
Before. But, I never once went anywhere thinking of myself as I was like, oh, I'm just an oppressed black man. I'm just like, I don't even. Yeah. Sometimes I forget I'm black in the world that I live in because I'm not thinking in my skin tone, and when I look at myself, I don't consider myself a black person. I mean, you probably are more black than me with all the sunshine you're getting down here in Miami.
I've been getting a lot of comments on my tan.
Yeah, lately. You're getting close. At the end of the day,
I like to think of myself as a Latino gringo,
Oh, heck yeah. Latino.
Yeah, that's right.
And so what happened from there was just like, I just consider myself someone that has a slightly better tan than the rest of the world.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed having fun. And there were a lot of people that through the years, after knowing and getting to know me, knowing that I wasn't like, someone who was like getting there for myself. And when I started the sport, I was someone who was very arrogant, very cocky, because I didn't know how the process worked. Right. So I got myself in a lot of trouble because I let my mouth run before I knew things. So I had to like backtrack and I had to go and apologize to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I definitely didn't come into the sport unscathed. You know, I came in there and had to get humbled, like very harshly, but I did inevitably. And, you know, learning through that entire experience and then having someone come up there out of nowhere and be like, so what do you think about all this? And my comment was just like, I think BLM is dumb.
Okay.
And everyone's like,
yeah, that was that would take the air out of the room around 2020.
and I'm just like, they're just like, care to explain? I'm just like, listen, I said, you have to be an idiot to bus, fly, and like carpool strangers from other districts and neighborhoods and states to come to your neighborhood to destroy everything and then just leave. And I said, if this was really about black lives, I said, what about all the black lives and all the black people that are on the news crying right now just because their shops, their restaurants, their business was a byproduct of people trying to prove a point that I said never solved anything.
Right.
I said, if you were really about black lives, you would have spared them at least to give yourself some credit to what you were actually standing for. But I said, you just went on a mayhem, which shows that you don't really care about the people that you're marching for. You just have an agenda. And I said, you wanted to get everyone afraid of you so that when you started saying this and started doing this and that, I was like, now people would just give you what they want, give you what you wanted when you asked for it without any hesitation or question because they're too afraid of you doing that to them. And I said, I don't like that because I said, if all of this stuff was to make black lives better, I was like, what child have they put through school? I said, what tuition have they paid for someone who actually has a chance to have a better life than the things that are waiting for them in the poor, unfortunate neighborhoods they come from? What community have they helped clean up? And I said, the same issues that they were marching for are still happening right now. And I said, no one's saying or doing anything about it. They're just saying that everyone's racist. And I was like, now, instead of people actually knowing that you're racist, now the issue is trying to prove that you're not. And I said, the more you try to prove you're not, the more you give in and feed what they're actually trying to prove in the first place. Yeah. Which is why you have so many generationally brainwashed people now that think they're inherently racist. And I'm like, racism isn't something that's inherently in your genetics. I said, it's something that you have to learn. You have to learn to hate things. I was like, because no one, when you first see anything, unless it scares you, you know, understands those kinds of things because you see it all the time with kids, you know, like 7 and younger that are just playing with their friends. And then they get around parents that start doing that. And now you start seeing kids act different. Yeah. You know, there's no such thing as a bad child. There's such things as bad influences on a child. And it always comes from like broken families or bad parents. Yeah. As a byproduct. And when that happened, after that, I was never seen again in the Olympic world. You know, like
so when did that interview happen?
2019.
Okay, so this came right after you had a big showing at the 2018 Olympics. Mm-hmm. You medaled, right?
No,
you didn't medal.
I didn't. But I got there. I'm an Olympian for life.
Yeah. So you're in the Jamaican Olympics, obviously, or you're in the Olympics representing Jamaica, and this press coverage comes a year later. And after that, there's a fallout. Mm-hmm. So what was the fallout?
Well, my Federation for Jamaica, they dropped me.
Okay.
But they were giving me so much flack already that it was almost inevitable. This was just what they used. And then when you read the article that they wrote about me last, when it's like Anthony Watson like leaves the Jamaican Federation, dude, like that's the one thing that's still like that's the one article that like still really gets me.
What did it say exactly?
They basically called me a waste.
A waste, wow.
Literally, without saying I'm a waste.
Yeah.
They said that. So the thing that really troubled me in that entire thing was they wrote an article saying that, oh, Anthony was never a real Jamaican.
Wow, that is so awful.
Literally, you can read that article. It says he's not a real Jamaican. Yes, he's Jamaican by heritage, but we reserve the right to reserve opportunities like the Olympics for real Jamaicans. Man. We didn't really see him as someone who had athletic potential. We never saw, and like I never went on any press tour attacking them. Yeah. You know, even though I had every reason to because of the things that they did. They withheld funding from me. They never let me join the team when they had trainings and whatnot. They basically set me out on my own. Now in the beginning, you know, I was never a part of any conversations. All the conversations were happening without me. And I kept trying to insert myself to be like, hey, what about me? And like any news, any updates, they're just like, oh no, we'll get to you eventually. And then I got so tired of being left out that I was just like, listen, if I'm going to be left out, can you at least give me permission to go here, here, and here so that I can at least do things for myself? And they're just like, you want to do things for yourself? I was like, well, that's the only choice that I have. And so, dude, like I was out of money on that. And this is the year of the Olympics that year. So I ran out of money. So I started trying to do like collaborations with brands. And then when they saw me working with brands, their rule in the contract that I signed was every athlete's allowed to work with brands, but it has to be approved by the federation. So I would bring them brands that like were going to give me a lot of money to like work with me. And then they would deny it and be like, well, unless the whole team can benefit from this, like, we're not going to approve it for you. And I'm like, but you guys have your own sponsors that you haven't let me have. You said that I could self-fund. I'm just trying to give you the courtesy of saying, like, this is who I'm working with. And now you want me to get the whole team involved. I said, how is this fair?
Yeah.
And it was the whole game of, like, we're going to make it as hard and as difficult for him so that he quits, so that we don't look like the bad guys for, like, kicking him out.
Yeah.
And so when I made it, even when I got to the Olympics, the last final straw as an FU after being left out all season, after being deprived of a lot of things all season, after being kept out of things all season, their final FU to me was when I qualified and got the very last spot for the Winter Olympics in 2018. They said, congratulations, you're going to the Olympics. However, we're not giving you a coach. So they took my coach away. So I'm just crazy. Like, I'm like, literally, like, you guys want me to fail.
Yeah.
And then when I got to the Olympics, my coach that was working with me all season, like, went to the Olympic committee and told them, he's just like, listen, I have an athlete that qualified. His country isn't giving him a coach. He needs help. Someone needs to step up and do something. I get a call from the vice president of the whole Olympic committee.
Yeah.
And he was just like, he calls me from like freaking Switzerland at like 8 a.m. his time, but it's like 3 a.m. in the States. And so I'm like, hello. He's just like, yes, I'm here to talk to Anthony. I want to talk to you about like your coaching situation. I said, listen, I've been getting in trouble all season. I said, at this point, I'm just here to I just want to get to the Olympics and I just want to go. And he was just like, but you don't understand. If they don't give you a coach, we as the Olympic committee are going to deny you competition, because in 2010 in Vancouver, I'm not sure if you've heard the story about that Georgian luge athlete who had never been to an Olympics, had never been on that track in Vancouver, and didn't have a coach. And when he went there to go train, that was the fastest track in the world. He lost control and flew out of the track and hit a pole and was killed instantly.
Wow.
So now they have a rule. If you've never been to this track, if you've never been in an Olympics before, and if you don't have a coach, like, it's the Olympic committee's job to work with your federation to find you one.
So you literally were set up in a situation by the Jamaican Federation, not only to fail, but potentially in a life-threatening situation. Because I mean, like, skeleton and bobsled is very dangerous.
Yeah. Especially
skeleton. I mean, you're like you said, 80 miles per hour.
4 inches off the ice head first.
Yeah, like that's fast.
I've lost teeth.
Yeah.
You know, see? I was like from hitting my head on raw concrete while my helmet flew off.
You screw up at all, you breathe wrong on that track, and something bad can happen fast.
Right.
And they're putting you in that situation with no coach.
And so I didn't know what to do. You know, so the first thing I did was I prayed about it. I'm like, God, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. But I was just like, and they were just like, what did the federation say? I said, listen, they've been giving me a headache all year. They told me some interesting things about the people who were in charge of my federation. They're just, you don't know much about these coaches, do you? I was like, well, this coach at the time was dating this British athlete, so she gave her a lot of favor in the British team, and so that caused a lot of commotion in the British team.
Oh my gosh, I've read this online where there's like so much like all these different athletes are hooking up with each other in the Olympic Village.
It's true.
It's like, oh my God, I bet there's like a million love triangles going on.
And then she got fired, and then she started working for the Brazilian team. But the performance of the Brazilian team was so awful that they fired her. And then he's like, and now she's working for you guys. And I was like, oh. And I was like, well, I didn't know that. But I said at the end, I said, I don't know what else to do. And they said, well, listen, let us take care of it. Because they said, you're not going to lose your spot because they can't do that to you because you've earned it. But we're not going to let this slide because you can't do it. It's too dangerous.
Yeah.
And we're not going to allow you to continue with this. And he's like, it's their job as your federation to supply you with the things you need to succeed. And I was like, you'd think, right? And then, so a week later, I'm on my flight to the Olympics. I get there the day after. I'm in a meeting exactly like we are right now. And I get sat down in front of my federation vice president and the 2 coaches and then the other guy who was there. And they just started yelling at me. They were like, how dare you embarrass us? You're somebody that's out there causing and spreading all these rumors and saying that we're trying to kill you when we've like set you up with someone else's coach. And I said, first of all, I'm not your son. You're not my father. And I was just like, don't ever sit here and like take this tone with me. I said, I didn't do anything. I said, I just got here. I haven't even been awake for 6 hours. I was like, what could I have done from now and then? They're just like, you went to the federation and said, I did no such thing. They said, well, they said that they spoke to you before you got here. And I was like, yeah, they did. And I brought my phone. I said, it says incoming call from this person. I said, I didn't call this guy. I said, I have no idea who he is. And he said, well, what did you tell him? I said, the truth. And he's like, what was that? It's just like that. I said, I qualified, but I said, you guys said that you were taking my coach away and that I had to figure it out with some other athlete. And they're just like, so what was wrong with that? I said, that athlete has worked really hard to get here. And I said, now for me to share his coach, I said, to me, that's kind of making him feel like I'm trying to like be better than him and do whatever. He has no advantage.
Yeah.
You know, I said, there's one thing to do it during season, but I said, this is like the finals. I said, now everyone needs to be laser focused and have people that are just dedicated to them, not splitting attention.
Yeah.
And I said, the fact that you guys went to him and said, hey, we're having trouble and doing this, knowing darn good and well that I had a space that you qualified for me to actually get here and actually have all this, and you gave it away. So what they did was they took the credentials that was supposed to be for my coach, gave it to a massage therapist that was supposed to be for the team, and conveniently, up until my event, the girl was not there. Then the day of my races, the day before my races, she shows up. So I'm helping her bring her stuff, her massage table and everything up into our apartment because they rented like buildings like this and every single apartment was like our room essentially.
Yeah.
And so I'm bringing stuff up and I said, and they told me at the beginning, she's having passport trouble. She's doing this and she's doing that. But that was the person who got my credentials from my coach that was supposed to be in the village with me. And so she was telling me, I was like, it's good to see you. I'm like, I'm glad that your passport troubles are over. She was like, what passport troubles? I was like, well, they said that you were having travel problems and that's why you weren't able to be here at the very beginning. They're like, no, everything was in order. They just told me to wait to come until this time. And then they just booked my flight like a day ago. And I was like, and that's when I was like, wow. I was like, so I had no, and they're just like, Anthony, it's just like, it was like the person's going to be here. You'll have access to it because I was dealing with an injury that I had all season with my hamstring. Yeah. I had dislocated my left hip 4 times. Like, you know, it's 2 months before I, you know, like had broken my right metatarsal bone in my right foot. And so I was like in bad shape, just wanting someone to work on me. And they're just like, well, there's a clinic in town. Just take a bus and go to it this way. You tell them you were with the Olympic team for Jamaica and they'll give you free treatment. I'm like, dude, this is Korea. I don't speak Korean. I know hello, how are you, thank you, and you're welcome.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I didn't know what to do. So I basically just suffered. And then when I get there to find out that they were keeping her from working on me and then keeping her for the girls bobsled team at the time, that's when I just like broke down. And then on top of that, they took the girls team and the whole federation away and put them in a resort during my event race, saying that it was for team bonding. Wow. So nobody from my country showed up to watch me race or support me at all.
Did you feel like at any point, like, I mean, I'm hearing this and I'm thinking, wow, like, I mean, do you ever at some point feel like you're in danger of something bad happening on the track?
I mean, the only time I've ever felt in danger, the only time you ever are in danger as an athlete on the track is if you don't know where you're going.
Yeah.
Your job as an athlete before you go to any new track is to do your homework. Yeah. So I can tell you right now from memory, in Calgary, Canada, there are, I think it's 18 curves with a kreisel. A kreisel is a curve that goes in a 360. So you'll enter the turn this way. And then when you leave, you'll exit the same direction, just at a different spot. Lake Placid.
So you have to memorize the physics.
Not the physics. You just like the one thing you can't do as an athlete in a sliding sport is get lost in the track. Because if you're someone that's driving and you don't know if a left turn or a right turn is coming next, you could go make a left turn, but it's going right, and you'll be doing this, and the sled will flip, the sled will roll. So many athletes have done that. And sometimes there have been times on tracks that I've known where I've hit myself so hard that I'm like, ow. And I like squint and I'm like, wait, where the heck am I? I'm like, oh, and then things like that kind of happen. Yeah. So you have to learn everything. Lake Placid has 19 curves. Salt Lake City has 15 curves, and I can still tell you what direction they go. So in Lake Placid, you go down the first one, curve 1,
up, down, left, right.
It goes down.
It's like the Contra password.
It goes right, left, and then it's right, left, and then right, left, straight, and then left.
We're gonna have a test on this later.
So your job is to at least know how many. The minimum that you're supposed to have memorized is how many curves are on the track and what direction they go. Because if you at least know, okay, curve 7, it's a left. Okay, I've got 3 more lefts. There's 8, there's 9, there's 10, and then you're like, okay, this and that. Then you start getting better at learning how early do I need to get on the track, on the curve? Yeah. How late do I need to exit? I was like, when do I cut off my rise? Because when I'm rising and you dig your shoulder in, the sled just starts evening out. If you just let it ride, the sled will go up this way. And then when you try to cut it off that way, you'll literally fall out of the curve, and then you'll hit the wall going into the next one.
Yeah.
So it's just like you have all of these things come down to a science, but the basic necessity that you have to learn is the direction. And so I had never been on there. So the only thing I had was point of view videos that like athletes will put GoPros on, and then they'll go so that you can at least see what the track looks like. But watching it from a YouTube video and being on it are two different things.
Oh, so you'd never even done a test run on this thing? Nope. Holy crap, dude!
And then on top of
this is like hearing this, I'm like, this has to be dangerous.
No, yeah. And then the training days that were designated for me to practice on the track, they took me away saying, "We need you for media training." So when I went to,
yeah, I bet they want you to do a lot of media training.
When I went to media training, like interviews with like Yahoo Sports and like CBS and then NBC and whatnot, I show up with my female teammates and everyone's like, "Oh, we're so happy to see you, the female bobsled team." And they're like, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "I'm Anthony. I'm the skeleton athlete." They're just like, "Oh, wow. We asked for you. They said that you were busy, so we didn't have anything planned for you."
Jeez.
So I'm sitting there in the background trying to keep it together, watching my teammates get interviewed and have all these documentaries. And like they got interviewed by like this, like football players, like they got interviewed by famous Olympians. They got interviewed by like people that I've watched in the Olympics on these broadcasting things for years. And I'm sitting there just in the background, literally like this, just like trying not to cry.
Yeah, so like the Jamaican Federation is just jabbing you left, right, and center, like nonstop. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable.
And all of it stopped the day that my father flew in to come and surprise me.
Really?
So he came in with a doctor who was working with me personally in Texas, who was also training me on the side, and I lived with him and his family for quite a while when I was down there before I got here. And then I remember like walking with my dad into the cafeteria, and the cafeteria was huge. It was like an indoor arena. So it was like the size of like the Miami Heat arena here.
Yeah. And
you've got food from every country, every continent, every country, because you got athletes that can only eat certain things. They want to eat their native food, so they have chefs, and like it's buffet style. So you can go to Asia, you can go to Europe, you can go to South America, you can go to wherever you want to go and stuff. And so I get there and my dad's with me, and across the whole thing at the very other end, it's like from baseline to baseline, the Jamaicans see me walk in and they're just like, "Anthony, get over here now." And they start yelling at me in front of everybody. And all the athletes that are eating right there are like looking at me and they start snickering. And I'm like, and my dad is like, "Who's that?" And I was like, "That's the Federation." I said, "You're about to see what I've been going through firsthand." So he's like, and then I was like, we just walk up together, and then they start yelling at me. They're like, "We told you to be here. We told you to do this." Like, "What's wrong with you? How are you not doing this and that?" And then my dad just steps in front of me. And then they're just like, "Who are you?" And he's just like, "I'm his father." He's like, "What are you doing to my son?" And it was like privates to a 4-star general after that. Like, "Mr. Watson, we're so proud of your son. He's so great." He's just like, "You must be so proud of him too. We can't wait to see you." Just like, did you travel far? It's just
wow,
like, you must have gotten here. Because the thing in Jamaican culture is that like you have a lot of people that don't have fathers.
Right.
So you have these men that grew up dads, that most of them probably have multiple kids everywhere. Like my dad is the oldest out of 4 from his mother, my grandmother, and then, but his father, I think, had like 6 or 7 kids. My uncle, who was right underneath my dad, his father in Jamaica had 27 from 27 different women. Yeah. My aunt, her dad had 13. And then my baby uncle who was born here in the States, she just had like him through a man here. Okay. And stuff. But women aren't people down in Jamaica. They're property. Yeah. Men aren't human down in Jamaica. They're animals. Right. And not all of them. But it's like the whole concept of it is party, have fun, and then just avoid responsibility or whatever. Right, right. And so when I was training in Jamaica with my teammates for a little bit, there were so many people that were just like, "Oh, I want to like date you. I want to go have fun." And I'm just like, I'm not really about that. And then my friend was just like, my teammate was just like, "Anthony, you can have like 6 kids down here and none of them will ever ask you for child support. None of them will ever find you." He's just like, "You can." I was like, "Yeah, but I won't ever be able to live with myself."
Yeah, that's
and that's the mentality of a lot of people. So, when they come here, the reason they get themselves in a lot of trouble is because they treat American people or other people like they would other people in the island. And people here are just like, "Who the heck you think you are?"
Right, right. Interesting.
So when I finally had my father step up for me, that's when they left me alone. And everything was fine. And, my dad was there to watch me race. My dad was there for like all of my race days. And like when he couldn't get into the village, I remember we would just sit in like the lobby lounge, kind of like your lobby downstairs, because if they didn't give you clearance, he wasn't allowed to enter the village. Right. So, for
they didn't mess with his clearance, did they?
A couple of days they did.
Of course.
And so, man, I remember just sitting there for hours with him one day. And all I did, dude, I just cried.
Yeah.
I just cried. I was upset. I was emotionally drained. I was spiritually tired. I was mentally exhausted, and I was physically in pain. And, you know, I remember him telling me, he was just like, you know, he's like, dude, you're here. He's like, you've done it.
Yeah.
He's like, this is just what makes your story more unique, is that people tried, but they couldn't.
No, I mean, you were still, I mean, like you said, you're Olympian for life.
Yeah.
They can't take that away from you, which is amazing.
And so I went through all of that. And when my dad left, that's when they started picking up again. So the story of the Jamaican team that year was they had hired a German coach with a Japanese, they had a Japanese sled sponsor. They had a Japanese sled sponsor, and they hired a German coach, but the Japanese sleds were new on the market, so they weren't as good as some of the other sleds that had been out there that were really, really good for driving and for pushing and everything else. Yeah. And so what ended up happening was they had the German coach. She bought them like one of the best German sleds ever. Like, she found a way to get it for them and like help them qualify, because had that coach not worked with them, they wouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
It comes to the Olympics, they fire her, keep the sled, and say, we're done with you. And
wow.
And so she was like, we were both in the apartment like one night, and she's sobbing, I'm sobbing, and she's just like, I don't get it, Anthony. I don't know what I've done. I don't know what I've done here. Is that they've taken me away. They've kicked me out. And I just can't deal with it. I'm just like, yeah, you're telling me? I was just like, they've done the same thing to me too.
Yeah, I don't think most people would realize how political this whole process is with the Olympics. I mean, and it seems like countries just kind of more want to look a certain way rather than actually excel in the Olympics.
Exactly. And most people are just happy with being there. For me, it's just like, look, I gave it my best.
Yeah.
Hoping that something could happen to give me the best chances of medaling. And even though I'm not an Olympic medalist, you know, I mean, like, I'm an Olympian.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, even if I was an Olympic medalist, I was just like, it's in the past. Yeah. I can't pull that out and have a ceremony every single time I want to take a look at it. It's
totally.
It's a personal momentum of accomplishment.
No,
That's
totally.
literally all it is. And so after that whole experience and excursion with them, what happened was that she went to the media. And so I'm literally still racing at this point. Like, my race days were 3 days in a row. And this is like 4 or 5 days before that. And, you know, we would sit there. She's like, you know, you're very strong. I was like, really? Because I'm falling apart. I was like, you don't see the moments that I'm up here sobbing my eyes out. She's like, you know, but she's like, you hold it together. I see you at the track, and I see you by yourself. I see you doing notes. I see you everything else. And she's like, I always wonder why they just leave you by yourself. I was like, I couldn't. I said, I have a couple of theories, but I said, I don't want to entertain that right now because it's just going to get in my head. And then what ended up happening after that was that she went to the media, and then she told them everything. So when I'm coming down, we have to do what's called a media walk. When you cross the finish line and get your sled, you have to go through basically this maze. Like if you're at like an amusement park, and you know how like they have the thing staggered, but at every corner there's Fox, there's NBC, there's CBS, there's CNN, there's these radio shows, then there's these journalists, and you have to go through the TV shows first, then you go through the radio shows next, then you go through the journalists last, and then you finish up, and then you go to the photographer and you take your picture for the day, and then they dismiss you to go home, back to the village.
Yeah.
So for that entire week, everyone was like, Anthony, what's the story of the Olympic bobsled coach? I'm like, I'm skeleton. And I knew what the story was, but I wasn't going to leak that.
Yeah.
And I knew what was happening, but I wasn't, I mean, like, I'm there to do that. I was like, I had nobody ask me how I was doing in that whole entire excursion of everything else except like NBC, because it was the Olympic level. So, right. I mean, like, you know, and I was so green. Like, if you look at the interview that I did when I was there, like, I had no idea what I was talking about, and I was just kind of all over the place. I really showed my ADHD in that interview. And then after my event was over and my dad had flown home, that's when the Jamaicans really come back full force, and they're just like, oh, we're going to get him now. So they're just like, we hear that Sandra, she's going to come and she's going to destroy the sled because she's been telling the media that. So we need you to sit in the sled from 8 in the morning until 7 in the evening when the girls have to come and pick it up for sliding. I said, you want me to sit in that dumb thing for 11 hours? I said, don't you think I got things to do? They're like, well, your event's over, and if you want to be a good team member, you can. So I would take the bus. I would go sit in there. I think I sat in there for a one full day for about 5 hours. And then after that, I was like, look, if they fire me, if they cut me, if they make me quit, I was like, right, at least I've done what I came to do. And I just left, and I never showed up again.
Yeah.
And so when the Olympics were over, I remember going to the airport with my president at the time, and
No closing ceremony.
no, I went to the closing ceremony.
Okay.
But I mean, like, the closing ceremony and the opening ceremony, they were a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was like the moment that I got to share with the rest of the world and whatnot, and like my family watching back at home. But that was what it was, man.
Yeah.
So I went through all of that just to prove that I was someone who put the work in, because you don't just get to the Olympics by wishing for it.
No, I mean,
you actually have to race, train, compete, and qualify.
Right.
And then even after doing all of that, had the people that were supposed to be doing the most for me to help me be the best of myself there, now doing everything they could to keep me from becoming the best. And then on top of that, writing trash saying that like Anthony had no athletic capability. He was terrible from the start. He just talked his way onto the team. And, we never saw potential in him from the beginning. And I was sobbing one day at the Olympic Village. This older gentleman came up and he just put his hand on my shoulder because I was like facing that way. He's like, my friend, he's like, you're at the Olympic Games. Why are you crying? What's so bad? What's got you so upset? And I was just like, listen, it's a long story. And I said, I don't want to bore you with that. He's like, have you had lunch? And I was like, no, I don't really have an appetite. He's like, well, come and sit with me. I haven't had lunch and I want you to tell me everything. I'm going to eat. You're going to talk. And then we're going to talk afterwards. He ended up being the president of the Puerto Rican Federation.
Wow.
So he was like, you want to come compete for us?
You could pass Puerto Rican.
No, my mother's Hispanic.
Okay, there you go.
My grandparents born and raised, and my whole entire mom's side of the family was born and raised in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
So I told him, I said, I have lineage. So after that, he went to the Jamaicans during like the this meeting that they have with every single head of every nation for winter sliding sports. And so it's actually a summit.
Yeah.
So the Puerto Ricans approached the Jamaicans and are just like, listen, Anthony Watson, are you still working with him? Because we would like him to come and slide for us. And then the Jamaicans, as soon as they heard that, they cut me.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they cut me, everyone started asking. It's just like, how come Anthony isn't here anymore? What's going on with that? And like I had reporters calling me being like, Anthony, we want the inside scoop. We want the story. We want this and that. And before that, man, even when I got qualified for the Olympics, I had reporters from Jamaica being like, so what are you going to say to Jamaicans because Jamaicans are very prideful people. And what are you going to tell them if you don't win a medal and you embarrass yourself and the country of Jamaica on the biggest stage of athletics? I said, well, I'll tell everyone who feels that way this. If you could do it better than me, I offer you the opportunity to try.
Come on out here.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
then we did what was called our press day, which is when we were in an auditorium, and I mean like an auditorium. It was like the size of the Staples Center.
Yeah.
And you have reporters from all around the world. It's like what you do for like the UFC weigh-ins.
Yeah.
Where you're all on stage and you're doing the press conference and you're talking, you got your name tags in front of there. They give you water and like sponsored drinks and everything else. And you're sitting there and you're supposed to be there for 3 hours talking to press to get statements from people all over the world.
Yeah.
And I sat there for 3 hours and watched every reporter only ask my female teammate stuff. The only question that I got asked was the only thing that got blown up on like Yahoo Sports, where they were just like, so Anthony, Usain Bolt said that he may try skeleton. What do you have to say about that? And I jokingly said, because I had been sitting there for almost 2 hours without engaging with anybody. And then I was just like, well, I said, if Usain Bolt, joins skeleton, I said, I'm out of a job. I said, what am I going to do against the fastest man in the world? Yeah. And then everyone laughed. And I was like, okay, there's some light humor, but it's
Did you ever meet him?
Yeah, I met him.
Yeah.
Him, Johan Blake, all those big sprinters,
Yeah.
and stuff. So when we were there, that story was the only thing that got taken from that.
Of course.
And then they're just like,
clickbait.
Jamaican athlete claims he's out of job and scared for his job if Usain Bolt
of course
joins Olympic bobsledder skeleton team. But the whole time I'm sitting there, it wasn't until the very end when we were almost wrapping up that our publicist came up and I heard her literally whisper in our president's ear. She's like, Anthony's been sitting at the very end without getting a single question. Can we at least make sure that he gets a question or two asked? And then the last question was just like, so you female bobsled athletes, it's just like, what do you have to say about this in the competition? And then they were just like, go Jamaica. And then they were just like, all right, guys, that's the end of it. All right, thank you. Next, we're going to have the Belgian team come in.
Yeah.
And so I got up and I just like left. And like the publicist came up to me. She's like, listen, I was like, I don't want to talk to anybody right now.
Yeah.
And then that was the entire experience, my friend. And so after that, that's why I said it was like, I'm like, really? So you guys want to get ahead of this because you want to make it seem like I never had a chance in the first place, so that you don't have to give an answer for your bad behavior.
Yeah, just a very political process. Super political.
So when I had the chance to like compete for another country, that's what I was like looking forward to until that political stance I took.
Yeah.
And then after that, there was no sponsor that would help me.
Right.
And like my family, I had bankrupted them, it felt like.
Yeah.
Because they had given me every single thing that they had. And I remember at the very end, my mom was like, listen, like, we can't do it for you again.
Yeah.
It's, and like, dude, I still feel awful about that, which is why, like, you know, when you first met me, like, I never told you I was an Olympian. Part of me still feels embarrassed to tell people I am because of how my experience was.
Yeah.
You know, am I proud of what I did? Absolutely. It's just like, if people ask me if I would go through it again to like get the same result, I don't know if I would say yes.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that people just don't know about. And, you know, especially from what you've described, I mean, it's such a political process. I'm sure there's a lot of different things that happen like this that happened within the Olympics in all different countries. But thank you for sharing that. That was super fascinating. And I'm just like horrified that an Olympian would be treated like this. You would never think that would ever happen to an Olympian. Let me ask you now, what are you up to now? What are you doing now? I know you're...
I work for Turning Point USA.
Yeah, you're
Turning
hanging
Point
out
USA.
with Charlie Kirk quite a bit.
Charlie Kirk, and, you know, he's my boss. He's a great boss. You know, he's somebody that I've always looked up to, because when I was going through that transition period where everyone was like skitsy and jittery and on the edge about saying the wrong thing and doing whatever, I was like, I can't be the only person that's like not afraid to call a spade a spade.
Yeah, so you basically spoke your mind in 2018 and 19.
And then got punished for it.
And got mega punished for it.
Yep.
And on the other side of that story, you've got Charlie Kirk, who is the king of speaking his mind.
The king of free speech. Free speech.
Free speech. The Mr. Free Speech himself is like, we got to hire this guy.
Yeah. So what happened was in 2020 and 2021, I was paying out of my own pocket. I was working at Dick's Sporting Goods part-time.
Yeah.
And didn't see myself working there. I'm like 30 years old. I'm like a 30-year-old man.
You gotta
like,
do what you gotta do
You know,
sometimes.
but like I said, it's just like after that 12, 13-year stint of like freaking working and like training and being an athlete in track and field and going to the Olympics and everything else, it's like I was a 30-year-old dude that was I was 29 living at home.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, like, I don't know what the heck to do with my life.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, I haven't saved anything. Everything that I've had, I've put towards this, and it just got tanked because of these reasons. And so I started, you know, working part-time, then paying out of pocket, and I would pay for my flight. I'd go and I'd share briefly some of what we shared here, because I've only ever done this deep dive of an interview one other time.
Yeah.
So I gave you everything I got.
I appreciate it, man.
It's your podcast. You're my homie. So I'm giving you all the real, raw me.
I appreciate it.
And, you know, so I would tell people briefly, I was like, listen, my Olympic journey was horrific. I said, there were a lot of traumatic things that happened to me there. But I said, listen, what I learned from that, I said, I learned a lot of life lessons. I learned dedication. I learned commitment. I learned how to communicate, and I learned how to survive. I said, you don't need to be an Olympian to learn those kind of skills. You learn them through this, and this.
Adversity,
So I started sharing people that I was telling them my story of like for like 3 events in, and I was just like, dude, I'm so bored talking about myself.
Yeah.
I was like, how can I talk to everybody about something that's universally connected to all of us? And everybody has things that they do. So I mean, like, it's been a process, but you know, like now my main mission is this, telling people to know what it's like to stand for something.
Yeah.
And I said, I hate when people say we need to stand up and do this. And I'm just like, because standing, and like the same thing as like, God bless America. I was like, they're words that mean something. But I said, because we've drifted from what they mean, now they're just slogans that you put at the end of a motivational speech. I was like, this is what it means to stand. So I always tell people the definition. I was like, stand by the Webster's Dictionary is an upright posture position held by one's 2 feet. And I always make a joke. I'm like, I'm literally standing. I said, but I know that some of you are younger here. So I looked up the Urban Dictionary of what it means to stand. And I said, it's the psychological willpower of somebody who's passionate about something. I said, stand on business. And I said, but I realized that most of you in here were born after the year 2005. So I said, I looked up the Gen Z version, and I said, it says it's an unhealthy obsession for something that someone or something that one person is passionate about.
And that generation has grown up in so much more fear about speaking their mind. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because of what it costs.
Exactly.
And everyone's just
I
don't want to lose my following. Yeah, I don't
yeah.
want to lose my money. And I'm just like, dude, like you and I will look at someone that has like 300 followers, or like 30 followers and stuff. And I used to like make fun of people. I'm like, dude, your following is so small. Like, who cares? No one cares. But I mean, like when I lost everything,
Right.
I had to swallow and eat a lot of crow.
Right.
But I tell everyone now, it's just like, look, you have 1,000 followers. If you were to take all of your followers and hold a meeting, I was like, that would fill out an auditorium
Right.
of 1,000 people. So I said, you have people that are following you to hear what you have to say. But I said, social media and virality is that one thing that a lot of people forget. It's temporary.
Yeah.
I said, people will start scrolling past your stuff on a regular basis if it's not something that they can connect with. But I said, nobody will ever forget a time that they experienced you in person. When you have a good way of communicating with people that makes them feel connected to you personally, that's when they'll support you any platform, no matter how many times they got to rewatch the same thing because of what the experiences you had with them. And the example that I give is just like, look, a lot of people talk about Jesus, but until people have experienced Jesus and encountered him, that's what changes their perspective to now they want to give that to everybody. And I said, with me, it's just like, I could care less about the internet. You know me, I hardly post on my social medias. I only post when I have to. But I mean, like me, I'm more focused about like the interactions that we're having here. I'm a personal person because the one thing that I needed to rely on more than anything going through those seasons was people.
Yeah.
It wasn't podcast. It wasn't social media. It wasn't anything else. I like avoided that because I was just like so sick of hearing the same old, same old. But, you know, now I take that and I use that to help anybody else that I can. And the main mission here is just to be like, listen, standing for something doesn't mean it always has to be combative. You know, I said, standing for something means that when people challenge it, you don't back away from it. When I said when it's challenged, you don't run from it. And I said when it needs to be spoken up, I said you stand up and you do it.
Yeah.
I said leadership is doing the things that nobody else wants to when nobody else wants to. I said it's showing up when no one else does. And I said it's leaving after everyone is left. And I said it's doing the things that everyone avoids doing. And I said the older you get, issues don't get easier. The only thing that's supposed to get easier is your willingness to actually step up to them. When things come up and you're used to just like taking it head on like this, you get so quick to reacting to it that you just start taking it to that. It's just like, that's when things, but I said it's a process. That's when things get easier to deal with.
Yeah.
You know, it'll shock you. It'll stun you a little bit. But, you know, like anything else, you're like, okay, I processed it. Now we got to get to work.
Yeah. And what's amazing is that all of the adversity you went through was eventually used to really empower a younger generation to stand up for their own beliefs, which is amazing.
Yeah. But I mean, like, in order for it to mean something, it had to mean something to me.
Yeah. No. And this was very personal to you.
Yeah. And it's just like, you can't tell anybody to do something from a place that you haven't been.
Exactly.
Or a place that you're not even willing to go.
Yep.
And I've gone a lot of places where I've had some heinous things said to me and some heinous things done to me for the sake of the few people that want to do what's right.
Yeah.
But I tell people doing what's right doesn't come with a paycheck. Doing what's right doesn't come with virality, fame,
Exactly.
or clicks. I was like, doing what's right is supposed to be done because it's the right thing to do with no reward. But nowadays, you got nobody that wants to do the right thing unless they get something in return for it. And I'm just like, well, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons. And I said, you're always going to be searching for something because now you're going to be in a position where you feel like, oh, it's just not worth my time. But then when someone else takes the thing that you left behind, now you get jealous and envious and you want to gatekeep or you want to try and knock them off because they did something that you could have done, but that you didn't.
Yeah.
So it's all about opportunities because in the world we live in, we believe in equal opportunities, but not equal outcomes. Mm-hmm. That's the world that we live in because that's reality.
Yeah.
Everyone has the ability to be involved in every single thing. But I said the passion, the dedication, the work that people put into it is what starts separating them before they get to the finish line.
Totally.
And so now the message that I go around with is just making sure that people appreciate who they are and where they come from, because a lot of people went through a lot to give them the easy life that they have now.
Totally.
And generations have always throughout history done two things. A generation will build something for the next generation following it, and the generation after it will either destroy it or they'll build on top of it. And so right now we almost lost everything. So we're in a rebuilding phase, but it's going to take everybody because the older ones need to be able to be examples for the younger ones. And it's not something that's popular because doing what's right never is.
Yep.
It's not something that's convenient because, you know, standing for truth, not subjective, objective truth isn't always convenient. It's never someone that calls you or like dings your phone and says like, would you care to take a stand for this today? It puts you in a situation where you either believe what you say and you can act on it, or you're going to be like everybody else that says it, but then never acts on it.
Yeah.
And so I'm somebody that acted on it. And then I was somebody that in that moment debated backtracking because I knew what would possibly come with it. And when it came with it, I was just like, well, I wish I wouldn't have said that. But everyone asks me now, they're just like, would you have taken anything back that you said about all these things attacking this group of people? I said, I didn't attack a group of people. Just because I hurt their feelings because I spoke the truth doesn't mean that I attacked them.
Yeah.
I said, I didn't call them out. I called them up. I said, there's a big difference. Calling someone out is when you just point out the problem and you make them feel bad for it. Calling someone up is when you address the problem and then give them the solution to fix it. Mm-hmm. And I said, all these people have the issues that they can to fix it. And I said, so many people marched for all of these people to have an equal opportunity where people don't look at race. Now you got CRT, now you got DEI, now you got all these things that now placate to a group of people that don't want to try.
Right.
And my whole thing is just like, if they don't want to try, let them fail. Because if no one's helping them succeed and no one's making them fail, then the only person they have to blame is themselves. But in the world that we're living in now, from people that say obesity is beautiful, which it isn't, from people who say that men can be men can be girls when they can't, from people who say that race is an inherent thing that you're born with and now you're inherently racist and whatnot, these are things that I know are false. Mm-hmm. And these are things that I don't only speak against, but I live out to show people how it can work. Back in the day, this would have been a crime, you and I doing this together.
Right.
But I said, look at how far we've come today. Is America perfect? Absolutely not. We have our skeletons in the closet. But for as messed up as we are still the finish line for the rest of the world, wanting to come here to have an opportunity that a lot of people squander every day because they don't know what it's like to go without anything.
Totally.
And so my mission here through this and through every interaction that I have is to let people know that it's just like every opportunity that you have is one that can easily be taken away if you're not someone that values yourself and the people around you. Because if you want to be successful in life, success ain't just about acquiring money. Money comes, it goes, you save it, people steal it, you burn it, you buy it. It's like you spend it, you save it. Material possessions, they can burn up and everything else. But like I told you before, nobody will ever forget a moment when they experienced you in person. If that's something that you can leave a lasting impression on, when people look at you and just like, nah, Alex, nah, I met that guy. It's just like, dude is like the nicest dude on earth, that kind of thing. And you have people, you have people that are able to speak for you in that kind of respect. You'll never be shy of opportunities. I can't tell you how many people that in this world that we live in now, with the people that I've sat in front of like this, would be like, what did you have to do to get there? I said, nothing. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't looking for it. I was just doing me over here. And I was just invited to come over here. Yeah. People's money doesn't sway me like it used to. Yeah. You know, Biggie was right when he said, more money, more problems.
Totally.
You know, and so all of these things that people have now, it's just materialistic things. People are forever, you know. When we pass, you leave all your possessions here, but you live on. Yeah. So I want to invest in what people are going to do for the long run rather than just what they can give me now, because there's nothing that I want from them. And, you know, like some of the best relationships I have with some of the people who are very, very, very well set off were the conversations that we had when I looked at them and they knew that I was coming from an unfortunate situation. And I told them, I was just like, listen, I don't want anything from you. You don't have anything I want. I don't want your money. I got a job. I don't need your possessions. I said, I got enough to get by. I said, I just want your friendship. Yeah. And that's like so rare to hear now because everyone's friendship always comes with strings attached to it.
So there's an angle usually.
Exactly. It's like, what do you want? And then like, you never hear from them. You don't talk regularly until they need a favor. Right, right. And me, it's just like those kind of people I keep at an arm's length. But people like yourself, brother, it's like you need anything, you call me anytime. That's why I'm here. That.
Well, hey, man, this has been an awesome conversation today. I really appreciate your time. Really appreciate you dropping in. And like I said, this has been your most important podcast.
This has been my most important podcast to date. Listen, I'll go anywhere for a podcast, but for Friends podcast, man, that's the ones where I give my all. So you got the best of me.
No, I appreciate that, man. Well, hey, we're going to drop all your info and Instagram in the description of this video. And thank you so much for dropping by. And great, best of luck to you.
I appreciate it, brother.
See you, buddy.
Big ups to you. Take care.